Good day everyone, Grumbles here with some more DCS dogfight action. Today I want to take a look at the Mig-15bis and the F-86F Sabre and how they compare in a fight, what the strong and weak points of those two fighters are, and a word or two on energy fighting, as it plays an important role in this matchup, more so than some may realize. I again did some training flights with a buddy of mine, a very good pilot I fly with since a while, but we're both somewhat new to the career warrior jets, having so far concentrated more on World War II or in my case also modern fighters. But this is exactly why we went up to improve our skills and knowledge on this matchup, resulting in some very nice Mig-15 vs Sabre struggles, sometimes fights that lasted over 10 minutes. Too long to show the whole one in some cases, I think, but with some, in my opinion, good examples on how the two planes behave and how to fly them against each other in different situations. Since the whole point of this endeavor is of course to train and improve our flying and understanding of maneuvers, we decided to get Tacview to help with that. Tacview is a third-party program that can record flights, in-flight simulations like DCS and a few others, and it helps immensely in analyzing and visualizing exactly what happened in the engagement. And this worked great, so I figured I will try that in a video as well to better explain my flying and thinking in the situations. So let's compare those two fighters a bit first and take a look at the strong and weak points of the F-86 Sabre and the Mig-15. And then we use some live footage as well as Tacview to go over some options on how to use the plane's strengths. The air war over Korea with the Sabre and the Mig-15bis provides a good opportunity to do so and especially take a look at the importance of energy in a turn fight. The two planes are relatively similar in comparison to what we saw in many other conflicts. For example, in World War II, a Zero in its capabilities, strong and weak points, is a lot further away from a F-4F Wildcat or F-6F Hellcat. A Spitfire is a lot further away in its strong and weak points from a Bf-109 or Focke-Wulf 190 than is the case with the Mig-15 and the Sabre, though there are of course still differences. That means that in those World War II matchups, it is, at least on a basic level, easier and more obvious to understand what your plane's strong points and your weak points are in comparison with the other guy. As I said, on a basic level at least, mastering those matchups still requires skill and knowledge, but the basic differences are more obvious. With the F-86 Sabre and the Mig-15bis less so. However, while they are more similar in their capabilities, they are by no means the same. Let's start with the strong points you have on the F-86 Sabre over the Mig-15bis. Now, the Sabre has a lower wing loading than the Mig-15 and a tighter instantaneous turn rate. Not by much, and fuel state as always plays a role here, but in general the Sabre will have just a slightly lower wing loading. The Sabre will also roll better than the Mig-15. Again, not a huge difference, but it is there, especially in faster speeds. And talking about speeds, the Sabre is also slightly faster than the Mig-15. The Mig-15's speed is limited by the fact that when you reach transonic speeds you will lose control over the plane and start an uncontrolled roll to the left or right, and if you don't manage to slow the plane down you will crash eventually. Another strong point of the Sabre is its radar-assisted gunsight. Korean War-era air battles are still pure gunfights, like in World War II, but take place at much higher speeds and it is often very hard to get into a good firing position in a 1 vs 1 duel. So you will often have to do long-range deflection shots at higher speeds. Getting the lead right at those higher ranges is not easy, and a gyro gunsight helps in a lot of such situations, though on the other hand it can be confusing at very close ranges. The Mig-15's gyro sight works well too, but you need to set the range manually like in World War II fighters, and in those higher ranges and speeds you need to get the range estimate decently right to get hits. This is the main reason why I got Tacview in the first place. I wanted to see exactly if I had my gun sight set for too long or too short ranges in a Mig-15 when I miss, and the program did indeed help me there. On the Sabre the radar does the ranging for you, and it is a very useful tool if used right. You do have to read the manual on the side though and operate it correctly. But then it will make hitting long-range deflection shots a lot easier. Though with the current damage model the effect of the 50 caliber guns is often very unsatisfactory. Here the Mig has the upper hand with its twin 23mm and single 37mm cannons. Other than that, it certainly looks like the F-86 has the upper hand so far. It turns better, instantaneous, it rolls better, it is faster, performs better in a dive. In all cases the difference is not that huge, but it is there. Interestingly though, both me and my training partner agreed that in a 1-versus-1 duel that starts with both planes at a similar energy state, the Mig-15bis has the upper hand. So let's quickly go over the Mig-15's advantage to explain the reason why we think that is the case. Well, other than the weapons, the main advantage of the Mig-15bis is its thrust-to-weight ratio. The Mig-15's engine has a slightly better thrust than the Sabre's, though it will react slower to throttle inputs. And the Mig-15 is lighter than the Sabre, leading to a much better thrust-to-weight ratio, and that is something which I find to be very important for pure gunfighters, as I've already mentioned when we were talking about the BF-109. This means especially in vertical maneuvers, but also in horizontal, the Mig-15 can gain an energy advantage over the Sabre and get the upper hand this way. This means while the Sabre has the better instantaneous turn rate, the Mig-15 has the better sustained turn rate. The longer the fight lasts, the more of an advantage the Mig-15 will have. The Sabre turns better at first. If the Mig plays its cards right though, it will soon be able to fly faster and therefore keep its maneuverability up better. The reason is pretty simple. In a turn, you are constantly accelerating in a new direction. That costs energy, more if the object is heavier. So the heavier Sabre needs more energy to keep its speed up in a turn of the same radius than the lighter Mig-15. And the Mig-15 also has slightly more thrust. And all that means that the Sabre will lose speed faster in maneuvers, especially in vertical maneuvers. The Sabre's slightly lower wing loading would mean that it can fly the same turn radius on a lower angle of attack and therefore less drag at the same speed. But the difference in wing loading is not that high in this case, not like when you would compare a BF-109 and a Spitfire for example, so not enough to counter this. Let's take a look at one training engagement in Tacview to show that off. Now in our Mig-15 vs Sabre training session we were both on the same side, so Tacview will show us both as blue, something I plan to change in the future, but that was the first time we were using Tacview, so it wasn't something I was thinking about at the time. In any case, in this first fight I will fly the Mig-15bis and my buddy will fly the Sabre. In the first charter encounter I want to show you, we will merge with both jets being at about a very similar energy state, and that is the reason I wanted to show you that one. Now, the energy of a plane consists of its kinetic energy, that's its speed and its weight, as well as its potential energy, its altitude and weight. Speed can be traded for altitude and altitude can be traded for speed, or in other words, potential energy can be traded for kinetic energy and kinetic energy for potential. Now, at the same speed in a straight line, the Sabre's kinetic energy is a bit higher because it is heavier. It also means that more energy is needed to get it to the same speed, so it will accelerate slower if it has the same thrust. But once it has the speed, it will also take more energy to slow it down again. It can keep its momentum up better in a straight line when it does not accelerate. However, in a turn of course you are constantly accelerating in a new direction, and here the lighter Mig-15 with its better thrust-to-weight ratio has the upper hand. So here we have our merge. Let me pause for a second. When you take a look at the telemetry of our two planes on the right and the speed and the altitude of our jets, you will notice that our speed and altitude and therefore energy state is very similar at this point, even though I came down from higher altitude, but my speed was slower than the Sabre's. Him climbing up and me descending equalized speed and altitude difference for the most part. In this situation, the Sabre with its lower wing loading will turn better for a short time. It has the better instantaneous turn rate and the better roll rate as well. We both turn around after the other. I try to go up in the vertical right away, hoping I might be able to roll around the Sabre and come back down behind it. But in this situation, the Sabre is more maneuverable than I am and pretty quickly manages to get behind me. However, at this point, with the energy state very close on the merge, the difference is not quite big enough to get lead to fire for the Sabre, and we end up in a pretty traditional turning engagement, although in the vertical. I prefer to use the vertical as much as possible in general, and in this case, with my jet being the better energy fighter, maneuvering in the vertical amplifies this advantage. If the Sabre would have had a higher energy state than my Mig at the merge, this would not work, because then it would have had enough energy to gain lead to fire, as happened in the footage of the Sabre I showed at the beginning of the video. Now however, the Sabre is on the clock. While we loop around, the Sabre is constantly losing more speed than my Mig, and I will eventually gain the upper hand if this continues. And then the Sabre will also at this low altitude have trouble disengaging from the fight, because while it is faster in top speed and much better in a dive, at this situation here there isn't enough altitude for much diving, and with my MiG now being on a higher energy state, the Sabre could not accelerate to its top speed fast enough before I would be behind it. Let's stop real quick again. If we take a look at the telemetry now, you will see that after a few loops the Sabre is on substantially lower speed than my MiG and no longer able to keep those vertical maneuvers up. Now my MiG has the upper hand. And I eventually end up behind the Sabre and can work on getting a firing solution on it. So this is a simple and quick example of why the Mig-15bis, when flown correctly, has the upper hand in a situation like this, and a basic example of what an energy fighter does. Now, that the MiG has the upper hand in this particular situation does not mean it is just a better plane overall, by the way, just that it has the upper hand in this situation. In another one, the Sabre does have the upper hand. As already mentioned, for example, at higher altitude, the Sabre can easily outdive the MiG, which just can't keep up this high speed in a dive without losing control of the plane. And the Sabre is more maneuverable when it has the energy. That makes it hard to get hits on a maneuvering Sabre if you don't surprise it and if the pilot knows what he is doing, because the Sabre can maneuver and especially roll very well. And when you manage to get a jump on the Mig-15 in a Sabre with an energy advantage, the Mig-15 has a hard time evading you because the Sabre is more maneuverable. Just make sure you don't hang around too long in a fight, because the MiG will eventually get the upper hand if the pilot knows what he is doing and if it goes on for long enough to equalize the energy states. Well, what do you do, however, if the situation is reversed, if you are engaged with a MiG in a Sabre in a situation similar to this, on low altitude and at a lower energy state than the MiG? A difficult situation to get out of, because you don't have the energy to properly fight or run. Well, as I said, the Sabre is more maneuverable, but the good MiG pilot will use his energy to go vertical when he can't follow your turn and then attack from above again. One thing you can try to equalize the playing field is to try to go for an energy trap of sorts, to try to get your opponent back into a maneuvering fight for long enough to get a shot. So let's take a look. Now in this training duel I'm flying the Sabre, and it goes somewhat similar to the first fight I've shown you. At the beginning I can use my Sabre's better maneuverability to get behind the MiG, but don't quite get a shot at it. And the longer the fight goes on, the bigger the energy difference between my Sabre and the MiG, until the point that I can't properly fight anymore. So when this point comes and I realize it, I break out of the fight and extend. Now, there's no way I can outrun the MiG, because its energy state is much higher than mine. It would take quite a while till this is equalized and my plane is the faster one again. The MiG will catch up much sooner. But the idea here is to at least reduce the energy difference and then hopefully draw the MiG into a maneuvering fight. That means you will have the MiG behind you at first, but there's little choice in the matter. So the idea is to extend, build up as much speed as you can in a straight line, and then when the MiG catches up to you again, use your better maneuverability to gain the upper hand at least for a short while, long enough to get a shot if possible. There I lost sight on the MiG for a second and gave it a shot where I shouldn't have, but this is the moment where you want to try to get back into a maneuvering fight with the energy you build up flying straight. Now, if you just go for a turn, however, a decent pilot in the MiG won't try to follow, as he knows you turn better. He will instead use his higher energy state to go vertical and attack from above while you turn below. That is why rolling scissors are a better choice here. That will often hide what's going on till it is too late, and makes it harder to judge for the attacker if he will be able to get a shot at you or not, and that often means that he will stay in the fight instead of going vertical, giving you an opportunity to turn it around. Of course, when you do manage to turn the fight around in this manner, you need to make something happen somewhat quickly, because otherwise the MiG will get the upper hand back again eventually. But this is one example for what is sometimes called an energy trap. There are different variations of it. I, as mentioned, prefer to transition into rolling scissors, but there are other possibilities. The main idea is that you have a plane that is somewhat more maneuverable and are facing an opponent with a faster plane or one that is just at a higher energy state at the moment and faster because of that. Flying straight or going in a bit of a dive can help to reduce this energy difference, although usually not completely negate it, because as you go in a straight line, both planes will get closer to their top speed and accelerate slower as they get faster. The plane with the higher energy state is faster. the Mig in this example, but that also means it creates more drag and will accelerate slower, so the speed difference is getting smaller as you fly in a straight line. If you have enough space or altitude in the Sabre, maybe even enough to completely turn the energy states around. In this case, at least enough to go on the offensive again. This kind of tactic can be used against planes with a higher energy state, energy fighters, or something going for what is often called a boom and zoom style attack in a gunfighter scenario. The Sabre, when fighting versus the Mig-15, is especially well suited for it though, because it is one of the rare gunfighter matchups where the faster plane, the Sabre, is also the more maneuverable one, with a lower wing loading as well as a better roll rate. While in World War II scenarios this is rarely the case. A better turning Zero, for example, is much slower than a Hellcat. But still, if you fly a Spitfire, for example, versus a Bf-109 that has an energy advantage over you, this is something that might help you get out of the situation. Of course, after missiles enter the playing field, this kind of energy trap won't work the same anymore, as it requires you to give an opponent a good target for a heat-seeking missile for a bit. And well, those were a few simple examples to showcase a few basic up and downsides of the Sabre and Mig-15bis in a 1 vs 1 duel situation, as well as some basics about the importance of energy in such a fight. I hope the use of Tacview helped to make some of those things a bit clearer. Well, and this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was informative, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.